Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Carson the Parts Guy presents Project A3 2.5T Quattro Manual. How I'm building the 07K Turbo 5-cylinder car that Audi should have built. This is the disclaimer, I have to read it. If you don't want to listen to it, please feel free to fast forward the video. The following presentation is the first of a series of 5 that leverages all of the knowledge I have acquired over 22 years in the automotive business and as a Volkswagen Audi enthusiast. I have made every attempt to present correct and factual information, with all sources indicated as necessary. This video series will provide knowledge of the VW AG07K engine and its derivatives, as well as all of the components and machining that went into building my specific engine to withstand turbocharging. Any attempt by anyone viewing this presentation to use the information provided and replicate the build depicted herein is done so at their own risk, and by viewing this presentation, you agree to indemnify me against any damages you may incur as a result of your usage of this information. Do not attempt to perform the work depicted herein unless you possess the technical skills, knowledge, and experience required to do so. All products and suppliers shown in the following presentation are not, as of the release of this presentation, sponsoring this build, and any details provided on the products or suppliers I've utilized for this project are for informational purposes only. Please do not ask me for wiring diagrams. They're copyrighted. Please visit Irwin on Volkswagen or Audi's websites as listed and buy a 1 to 3 day subscription, then download them and keep them forever. I would also suggest that you download the service manuals while you're at it. I am a retired fixed operations professional with 22 years of experience, 17 of those with Volkswagen and Audi. I'm a former Master Certified VW Audi Parts Consultant, a former Certified VW Audi Technician, former Certified VW Service Consultant, and a current Audi Club North America HPDE instructor. If you've never been to an HPDE, I highly recommend it. I'm on Facebook at Carson the Parts Guy, Instagram at Carson the Parts Guy, and if you find the information provided in this video helpful, please like and subscribe. I appreciate your support. Presentation 1 of 5 contents, including the 07K engine history and features, all 07K engine codes, derivatives, and what models have them, including factory turbocharged variants and which engines have the best chance of having a factory forged crankshaft. Why use the 07K? Component interview of what my 8P-A3 Quattro already has that will be used with the new engine, and component overview of the parts being used to build my specific engine. 07K history and features. The 07K naturally aspirated engine started in 2005 and a half in the Jetta Mark V, 2006 in the Mark 4.5 Beetle, and Mark V Rabbit/Golf in North America. It's also available in the new midsize sedan Passat from model year 2012 to 2013. Last year was 2014 in the Beetle and Golf, 2013 in the Jetta and Passat. The naturally aspirated 07K was specific for the North American market, although I heard they also got imported to Brazil. The 07K motor has a cast iron block with aluminum head and port fuel injection. The 07K TFSI was available in North America only in the 2012 and 2013 Audi TTRS or 8J. It was used worldwide in the 8J TTRS and the 8P RS3. The block is vermicular graphite cast iron with aluminum head. It's the first gasoline Volkswagen Audi engine that was used with this particular metal composition that wasn't a TDI. It has direct fuel injection. The 07K Evo TFSI arrived with the 2017 8V RS3 and is still used in the current 8Y RS3. It was also used in the 8S TTRS from 2018 until production ended in 2022. It's used worldwide in the same models as well as others. Aluminum block and head, port and direct fuel injection. It has 10 fuel injectors. All 07K engines feature the same firing order as the classic 034 block Audi inline 5, which is 1, 2, 4, 5, 3. And all 07K engines utilize the Volkswagen Audi 4-cylinder engine bell housing pattern. The naturally aspirated 07K engine codes are BGP, BGQ, BPR, BPS, CBTA, and CBUA. All of the idiosyncrasies of those engines are listed on the screen. You have your 150 horsepower variant and 170 horsepower variant. The early 150 horsepower codes have the best chance of having a factory forged crankshaft. Around 2007, cast cranks started filtering into the production line. The best way of determining if a crankshaft is forged is to remove it from the engine and tap it with a metallic object like a screwdriver, and with the crank sat with its nose on the ground. If it rings like a tuning fork, the crank is forged. If a dull metallic noise is heard, the crank is cast. The other way to look is at the crankshaft for part lines in the crank weights from the forging process. There's other videos on YouTube that you can look at that will show you what the part line looks like. Various sources say that a T30 oil pan bolt denotes a forged crank and hex head bolts denote a cast crank, but I can verify that my BPS engine that is featured in this video has a forged crank and hex bolts. The best bet is to look for the part lines in the crank weights or remove it and tap it with a screwdriver. It's also said that crank part number 101E is forged, with other part numbers being either forged or cast. My forged crank is a 101F. The 150 horsepower engines also have smaller intake valves that the later 170 horsepower versions and the turbocharged variants don't have. The aftermarket valves will either need to be modified to fit, the head modified to accept them, or you can use a later 170 horsepower head that will accept them right away. The 170 horsepower engines have a revised timing chain setup that is compatible with the factory 8JTTRS forged crank, and this also increases the flywheel bolts from 6 to 8. You can also backdate the timing setup on the newer engine to run the early style setup if you have an early 6-bolt forged crank. The following are the specifications for the naturally aspirated 07K engine. And please note that all naturally aspirated 07K crankshafts have a 6-bolt flywheel pattern that is the same as Volkswagen Audi TFSI 4-cylinder, meaning BPY or BPG. Also, the 1.8T has the 6-bolt crank. The 2.5 TFSI engine, or SEPA, are the following specifications. Big thanks to my friends who provided their photos of their Mark II 8J TTRSs. The 2.5 TFSI DAZA, or 07K Evo, has an aluminum block, helps it weigh 57.3 pounds less than the SEPA, along with other weight-saving measures like aluminum hardware. Everything else is pretty much the same, although it does include a factory 360-degree thrust bearing on the crankshaft in the DAZA engine. Big thanks to my buddy Matt for providing photos of his 8S TTRS. So why use a 07K engine? It bolts to just about any Volkswagen Audi transmission with a 4-cylinder bell housing when used with an appropriate flywheel. If you swap to a VR6, it requires a different bell housing for the transmission if you're replacing a 4-cylinder. It will bolt up to 6-speed 02Q manual transmissions or 02E DSG transmissions with minor clearance work done to the bell housing to clear the timing cover. Naturally aspirated 07K engines are overbuilt from the factory with regards to their stock power levels and do not fail often when left stock, leading to cheap availability at automotive recyclers and with private sellers. Most failures are due to owner abuse or lack of maintenance. OEM solutions to mount the engine in a factory transverse layout from Mark IV VW up to present day. aftermarket solutions to mount it in vehicles previous to Mark IV, and turning the engine longitudinally for use in Audi, Porsche, and other vehicles. It responds well to turbocharging when tuned properly and within the limits of the factory rods and pistons. Roughly about 350 foot-pounds of torque at the wheels is the max on stock rods. Consensus on max wheel horsepower is between 400 to 450. Or you build the engine like we're doing here and go much higher. Accepts most of the performance parts intended for its turbocharged siblings for a much more affordable price of entry. The SEPA engine is about $5,000 or more used. DAZAs go for about $12,000 or more used for a stock engine. And of course, the 5-cylinder exhaust note symphony of the Audi gods. Existing modifications on my A3 Quattro that will be used with the 07K engine include a Miltech 2.75-inch catback non-resonated exhaust system. The battery has been relocated to the trunk with the OEM jump point installed in the engine compartment, and the trunk battery well is the factory location on the SEPA TTRS and RS3. I have an APR front mount intercooler that I will be reusing. It's originally intended for the BPY or CCTA engines, but the core is good for 1,000 horsepower, so we're just going to go with that. The NFQ code Eurospec 02Q manual gearbox swapped in to replace the factory DSG. My swap video also on YouTube on the same channel covers that, so please feel free to check that out at your convenience. I also have a stainless clutch bleeder block, stainless clutch line, and a nothing leaves stock shim kit on the slave cylinder, which I've heard is no longer being manufactured. A Pro Sport Evo digital boost gauge mounted in the driver's side outer AC vent, and Touareg 1LE 4-piston Brembo calipers over Mercedes ML350 330mm rotors to get this car to stop. The preliminary component list and modifications. Here's what I have so far. The machine work performed includes decking the block slightly, along with the lower timing cover to ensure clean and straight mating surface for the cylinder head. The cylinder head was also decked slightly for the same reason, just to clean it up. Cylinder bores were finish honed only to retain a factory 82.5mm bore. The crank was polished and rotating assembly balanced. The main caps were a line board to facilitate running integrated engineering ARP main studs and standard size main bearings across the crankshaft. All bearing clearances were checked. The number 4 main cap was modified to accept an Audi 034 block thrust washer on both sides to create a 360-degree thrust bearing front and rear to help prevent crank walk. That is pictured on the right side of the screen. The block and head were washed in Magnaflux to check for cracks. The Supertech stainless intake valves were machined to fit the 150 horsepower BPS cylinder head, and the valve guides were checked. The thrust bearing mod video is listed below the picture, and the machine work was performed by CW Pence Rebuilders and Machine Shop. I will put the thrust bearing mod video link in the comments. The pistons are forged JE pistons. They are specified for the DAZA engine. 82.5mm stock bore with a 22mm wrist pin, a thermal barrier coating on the top, and proprietary JE coating on the skirts. They were purchased from Pure Motorsport in California. The connecting rods are Integrated Engineering Tuscan I-beam forged, and they are 22mm wrist pin for aftermarket pistons. I purchased these new secondhand from my buddy David Castro. New, they're available from Integrated Engineering. The crankshaft pulley damper is a genuine Audi crankshaft pulley damper from a SEPA engine. Part number 07K105243H. It prevents the belts from coming off the engine when going past 6,800 RPM, as I'll probably be revving this to about 8,000 to 8,500. It's a fluid damper and frees up about 15 horsepower at the crankshaft, and I sourced this new from Audi. The main studs are an ARP main stud kit by Integrated Engineering. They require a line boring and honing to use due to changing the clamping force of the main caps onto the crank journals, and I purchased those from Integrated Engineering. The engine bearings, I went with King. Part numbers are listed on the screen. The 07K block thrust washers, I've listed the part number, but they are no longer available in North America, and they're currently not being manufactured on the aftermarket either. The thrust washer for the 034 block is also listed on the screen, and I purchased the King bearings through eBay. The piston oil jets and squirters, the stock naturally aspirated 07K oil jets are undersized in comparison to the SEPA engine or the EA888 Gen 1 2.0 TSI engine. The naturally aspirated 07K block will accept the upgraded oil jets without modification, and the part number for the upgraded oil jets is 06J103154AA. And they are sourced from any Volkswagen or Audi dealer. The timing components and gaskets, I'm not going to say every single one of these here. Feel free to pause the video, take a screenshot, and use it to your advantage. I sourced these from FCP Euro and the VW dealership. All parts are specified for early unrevised timing chain engines, so these will not fit a SEPA or later 170 horsepower engine. These are only for 150 horsepower engines. We have other miscellaneous hardware listed here. It is not a complete list. It does not include lower oil pan bolts, flywheel bolts, exhaust manifold hardware, intake manifold hardware, and oil filter adapter hardware because I am not using factory parts for those specific items. It does include the 2 oil galley plugs that need to be installed, cam cage bolts, accessory bracket bolts, upper and lower timing cover bolts, crank pulley bolts, and timing chain securing hardware. Cylinder head studs is an ARP head stud kit by Integrated Engineering, which was sourced from Integrated Engineering. The cylinder head gasket is a factory SEPA head gasket, part number 07K103383L. It is thicker than the naturally aspirated 07K head gasket to help lower compression for turbocharging. Combined with the DAZA-spec pistons and naturally aspirated cylinder head, it brings the compression ratio to about 9.67 to 1. And these are available only from the Audi dealer. For valve train, it is all SuperTech. We have black nitride coated stainless steel intake valves and iconal exhaust valves with single groove valve keepers on both. And we have the SuperTech steel alloy valve spring and titanium retainer set. The intake valves were cut by lathe to stock size and 2-angle ground by CW Pence Rebuilders to fit the 150 horsepower 07K head. If you want to use the valves as is, again, you have to use a 170 horsepower head. And I sourced these from CSP Racing, RCA Garage, and Integrated Engineering. The valve cover I'll be using is an S&P billet aluminum valve cover with the Audi football logo engraved into it. It is threaded for a breather port to route the PCV to a catch can, and that is on the driver's side of the engine. It has been powder coated in clear to protect the bare aluminum finish from corrosion. And I sourced that, of course, through S&P Automotive, and the powder coating was handled by Kampala Customs. The oil filter housing is also from S&P. It is billet aluminum with a built-in thermostat. It converts the engine to use a screw-on canister filter instead of the factory cartridge filter with a plastic housing. And you can use the 06A 1.8T filters or the 068 big filters that they used on the Passat and A4 to add oil capacity and help prevent oil sludge. It has built-in ports for OEM oil pressure sender, the filter port for the turbocharger oil feed, coolant feed to the turbocharger or wastegate, and aftermarket oil temperature and pressure senders. It is thermostatically controlled for feed and return ports to the external oil cooler that we'll be running. And again, that's sourced through S&P Automotive, and I believe it's also available through Iabed Industries. The oil cooler is a Durali 13950 Atomic Cool remote oil cooler with fan. And I'll be setting this up with a custom bracket to mount it behind the driver's side bumper vent as a pusher fan so that the fan protects the cooler from road and track debris. And you can control the fan via ECU or a manual switch or thermostatically controlled switch, and relay and wiring kits are available for that, and I got that one from Amazon. The radiator is a CTS Turbo aluminum radiator. Is intended for the factory CCTA motor in my A3, but the radiator inlet and outlet are on the same side, just like a 07K spec radiator. It increases the thermal capacity of the cooling system. It's direct fit for my car as is. It may require some tweaking once everything is installed, but I will tweak it because I want the aluminum radiator. I got that from Euro Tuning on sale. The fuel rail is from Integrated Engineering. It's a billet aluminum fuel rail. I sourced it from Black Forest Industries because they had the best price. Fuel injectors are 1500cc Bosch EV14 ST long nozzle fuel injectors. They are E85 compatible, and they're sourced from KSM Motorsports on eBay. The intake manifold is an Integrated Engineering cast aluminum short runner intake manifold, and I happened to get that from USP Motorsports because they had the best price on it. Fuel pump is a genuine Audi in-tank fuel pump from an 8J TTRS or SEPA. Part number is 8J0919-051E. It comes with a new fuel level sending unit, and you should use a new sealing ring when installing, and that is a 1J091133B. And I got mine from the Audi dealership, but you can source one aftermarket. It's a VDO, commonly carried in a lot of places. Fuel pump controller is a TorqueBite PM4. It can run pulse width modulated fuel pumps, either controlled by the ECU or on its own. It can run two pumps in parallel for upgradability down the line in case I need more fueling. The factory 8J TTRS fuel pump controllers are not being produced anymore, so you can order one at Audi, but you'll never get it. And the factory EA888 controller will burn out attempting to run a TTRS fuel pump, so this is kind of a necessary upgrade. I'm also going to be controlling the fuel pump via pulse width modulation through the ECU, and that I sourced from BMP Tuning. Engine management is an Ignitron ECU. It's designed for Volkswagen Audi 4, 5, or 6-cylinder applications. It is plug and play with the ME7 engine harness for the factory BPS motor, and I'll be using that. The vehicle side will require a harness adapter to adapt MED 17.5 to ME 7.1.1, and I will have to make that myself. I will cover that in a future video. And this ECU is CAN bus enabled, so it will talk to all of the other control units in the car and will behave like a factory ECU and keep everything in the car behaving like factory. And I sourced that from my buddy Mark Swanson up at EFI Motorsport. The turbocharger is a Precision 6266 Gen 2 ceramic ball bearing, oil only, lubricated and cooled. It's a .82 AR with V-band in out, and it is 800 wheel horsepower capable, but I will not be shooting for 800 wheel horsepower with this build. And I sourced that from maperformance.com. The exhaust manifold and downpipe were sourced through Race 3 Motorsport. They are built to order. It's a tubular exhaust manifold with bottom mount design, and it places the turbo similarly to a stock SEPA or DAZA and keeps the center of gravity low because I will be tracking it, so that's important to me. It accepts a 44mm V-band external wastegate, and I have acquired it with the optional 3.5-inch downpipe that incorporates wastegate recirculation, so no hood exits. It all goes out the back of the car like a factory setup would. And it clears the all-wheel drive angle drive without issue, and again, I have ordered that from Race 3 Motorsport. I'm still waiting to receive it. The clutch pressure plate and flywheel setup is a Clutchmasters 850 Super Single with ARP flywheel bolts. and a new clutch slave cylinder and release bearing is included with this setup. I sourced it from Mike Hood over at Ringer Racing, and please note that the Diamond Claw friction disc in the picture will not work with the 07K motor as it sits on the factory, because the engine speed sensor wheel that the actual sensor reads off of the crankshaft is a shim that goes between the crankshaft and the flywheel. So if you put a Diamond Claw on one side of that, it's only increasing the friction between the flywheel and this sensor wheel. It does not increase the friction between the flywheel and the crankshaft, so it could still come loose. So what I have done is I have ordered and received a spare sensor wheel off of eBay, and I have sent that out to a company to be composite diamond coated to turn it into a friction disc itself. And I will go over that in the third video of this series coming up. So parts I still need to acquire, which will be sorted out in future installments of this build series. I need to acquire 44mm external wastegate, boost piping from the turbocharger to the intercooler and intercooler to throttle body, and intake piping to the turbocharger. So I'll have to likely fabricate the piping, and for the intake, either modify a cold air intake for a TTRS or fabricate one. A blow-off valve, leaning towards a 50mm blow-off valve. Upgraded engine and transmission mounts, because I need a 07K specific mount, and I need mounts that are going to hold up to my intended 720 crank horsepower. So Black Forest Industries or 03 Motorsport are where I'm leaning towards those. Map sensor, probably a 4-bar. Coolant hoses for 07K specified for Mark 5 or Mark 6 chassis. Turbo oil feed and return lines. Modify the upper oil pan for turbo oil return line, or acquire an upgraded lower pan. S&P makes one with baffling and additional capacity, plus oil return line and catch can drain line fittings built in. I don't think I will be draining my catch can back into the crankcase. Catch can setup. AS1 Automotive's 07K specific can is the most elegant solution because it attaches to the upper timing cover of the back of the engine. Possibly a flex fuel sensor to run E85 down the line, and transmission upgrades are a possibility, possibly doing a limited slip differential, metal shift forks, a billet insert for the hollow shaft, and aftermarket shifter assembly. And if you are interested in sponsoring parts for my build and have them featured in the future assembly and installation presentations, please reach out to me via social media, private message, or email me at carson.heater@gmail.com. Questions, comments? Did I leave something out? Please make sure to use the comments section here on YouTube, and I'll do my best to respond to your comment or answer your question. Thanks for watching. The next video will be a first-person view of the disassembly of the 07K engine by my build partner, Matt Guerra, and narrated by me. Actual video of a 07K engine disassembly that isn't a hack job. Stay tuned. See you next time. Thanks for watching. The next video in the series will be a first-person view of the disassembly of the 07K engine by my build partner, Matt Guerra, and narrated by me. This will be actual video of a 07K engine disassembly that isn't a hack job. Stay tuned. See you next time.